Dawn sits pale on stone. A chill breeze walks the ridge where builders once measured a grand porch for the great temple that crowns the city. Workmen arrive early, shoulders under poles, voices low. From here, the rooftops fall away to the open floor that used to hold winter water and cart ruts. Now the ground is drained and firm. The river Tiber catches first light beyond the bends, and a thin mist slides over its surface like breath. On the slope below, lictors pass with bundles of rods that make space in a crowd. Their step is steady, their faces still. This is a city that can feel both ceremony and strain. A group of elders gathers at the edge of the square. Their cloaks show years of service. Their talk turns to the weight of rule and the danger of pride. A name rises and falls among them, carried on the kind of quiet that warns more than a shout. Tarquinius Superbus, the proud king who holds power as if it were his private tool, not a public charge. He has raised walls and laid stones. He has also pressed men hard and allowed a house to forget restraint. Stories will place a wound in a woman's honor at the center of this turn. That wound becomes a public cry, and the cry becomes a line men swear. No more kings, not by any name. Before that oath is spoken aloud, the city is already learning its lesson in smaller ways. Markets need safe ground, so a channel carries water away from the low place and under the new paving. Priests keep calendars that match feasts to seasons and keep courts from meeting on unlucky days. Workmen bring heavy beams to the hilltop temple that looks over all. A ruler can claim these projects as his, yet the truth is plainer. The city itself wants dry feet, steady time, and a shared roof for vows. When one man forgets that truth, the square remembers it for him. Welcome, friend. Settle in, get comfortable, and let the noise of the outside world soften. This is your quiet corner of history, where the past unfolds slowly and gently with no rush. Whether you're here to drift into dreams or letting this play softly in the background while you do something else, I'm glad you're here. Before we drift into history, tell me in the comments, what's one place in the world you'd love to see in person? Now the oath becomes life. Men who have carried messages for the palace stand before the people and speak differently. They do not ask for obedience to one name. They ask for consent to a new shape. The crowd answers in a tone that sounds like a fair price in a market. Two officials will carry the highest charge, not one. Their time will be short. Each will be able to stop the other if judgment runs hot. The rods that once walked before a king now walk before a pair, and the sight means something else. Discipline still counts, yet discipline now wears a costume that the people have allowed and can refuse. Names rise that will become familiar. Brutus, whose stern choice turns a private hurt into public change. Collatinus, who shares the first load and then steps aside to calm suspicion. Valerius, who brings laws that bend power toward daylight. The Senate remains as a council of elders, no longer around a throne, but still ready to weigh treaties, guard the chest, and advise in storms. A small state within the city's mind remains for sacred duty alone. The office of king in rights, now parted from command, keeps the talk with God steady, while command itself becomes a trust that ends with the year. Watch the square in the days that follow. Two chairs stand where one stood. Attendants make way and measure the distance between them. Petitioners bring cases and learn that an appeal can now reach the people if a sentence touches life. A crier names that right in clear words. The new officers take auspices before they act, since even change must pass under the same sky. The rods still bite when law requires, yet a curtain of custom and rule now hangs between rods and flesh. The city breathes easier because it can now see how a heavy hand is guided. This shift does not erase older marks. The great drain still drinks from the square when rain runs. The temple still rises, a pledge that the city will finish what it began, no matter who holds office. Old clans still carry names that turn heads. But the tone is different. Men who once stood in the palace doorway now stand in the street and feel a new weight. They belong to the city first, to their own houses second. Power has been made portable, and the handles are plain. Evenings in these weeks have a change in sound. Songs at hearths speak less of a single warrior and more of a people who guard their own tools. Children hear that the word for king is now a warning. They repeat a line about two officers who must never forget that they are being watched. Elders nod. Traders approve. Farmers shrug and hope that levy calls will be shorter and that roads will be finished on time. The city has taken a step from habit to rule, and feet test the new ground without hurry. Before long, an old enemy walks the ridge roads and tests the gates. A single pair of officers chooses to name one man for a short, fixed span to meet the threat. He answers, wins, and then steps down. A story grows of a farmer who left a plow, took command, and returned to his field. Whether each detail is exact matters less than the ideal that it holds. Power is a tool, not a home. To give it back on time is the finest proof that a city's promise is real. Sleep returns to houses by the river. Lamps fade, dogs settle. The river Tiber moves slowly past the island and under the bridge that creaks in late night. A change in rule has not torn the city. It has tightened it. In the morning there will be cases, markets, rights, and the sight of rods that mean law without fear. That balance, once felt in a few heads, now lives in the open like sunlight on clean stone. Morning business begins in orderly lines. The two highest officers sit on chairs that show rank without pride. Lictors set their rods down at a proper angle and stand aside. Petitioners step forward by turn. A neighbor speaks of a boundary stone moved at night. A trader asks that a debt be counted fairly. A veteran wants a clear ruling on land promised after a campaign. These are ordinary matters. They are also the heart of the change. They show that power has learned manners. The Senate meets in a hall that smells of wood and old smoke. Light falls in squares across the floor. Men of age and service take places they have earned and speak with calm weight. They do not command armies. They remember history, state opinion, and steady the purse. In times of fear, their advice is rope that keeps men from pulling in different directions. In times of plenty, their questions keep building honesty. Continuity across the break from monarchy matters more than the break itself. A city that keeps old voices while trying new forms learns without shaking itself to pieces. A separate set of hands keeps the gods' calendar sound. The office of king in sacred things stands apart from politics, with a head priest who minds rites that reach backward beyond living memory. The chief of the greater priestly college reads forms, judges days, and keeps the bridge open between vow and fulfillment. Festivals still pace the year. The city bows its head on certain mornings and lifts it on others. Courts wait when the sky and the book say wait. Commanders take auspices before levy calls. The divine order that steadied a king's hand now steadies a pair. That continuity keeps many hearts from fearing that novelty will anger old powers. Offices below the top pair take clearer shape. Quaestors mind cash and grain. 2 men are chosen to number the people and grade their property. These censors will become a kind of public conscience, saying who sits in the Senate and who does not. Yet for now the point is simpler. The city is learning to make many minds carry the load once placed on one back. Short terms, paired seats, and open steps keep zeal from turning into zealotry. Assemblies take on more weight. One, built around the muster and property classes, votes on the largest matters and chooses the highest officers. Another, framed by tribes of city and field, begins to pass laws that touch daily life. The crowd hears proposals in spaces shaped for sound. Priests look to the sky before a vote. If signs are wrong, a hand is raised, and the act waits. The habit teaches limits without insult. Men grumble and then return to business when the cloud passes. Across the river roads stretch out like careful lines drawn in dust. A straight course toward the south is under thought already in these early days, since the ridges and marshes waste feet and carts. A future censor will make that line hard and famous. For now, small teams of surveyors pace fields with cords and plant markers that keep neighbors honest. The simple rule that a fair line saves quarrels feels like a kind of law on its own. There is strain under the surface, and everyone can feel it. Debt sits heavy on men who left fields for levy seasons and came home to thin harvests. A form of bondage by bronze and promise ties bodies to posts in courts when the coin runs out. Voices at markets speak more softly when a creditor walks by. Some older names find it easy to make private calls inside public forms. Resentment runs like a low current that shocks anyone who stands still too long. The new order will need more than a pair of officers to answer that question. Pressure gathers in a way the city cannot ignore. The men who fill the ranks and carry loads decide together to set their tools down and leave the walls. They walk to higher ground and camp. No torch is raised. No gate is forced. Silence and absence do the work. The elders who remain look across the empty square and feel the hair on their arms lift. A house without its workers and its young fighters is a shell. Talks begin at once. An office is born to guard those who walk. Tribunes of the plebs take shape, their safety held by a vow that any blow against them is a blow against all. They stand in doorways and alleys where hurried judgments fall, and they say one word that can stop harm until the people can be heard. Aediles stand beside them to mind records, markets, and grain. The city gives itself a hand that belongs to those who could be pinned to the ground most easily. With that hand, it steadies the whole body. Law before this moment has been a mix of memory, custom, and favor. Neighbors know the shape of fair, but words bend under pressure. A thought takes root. Write rules down where all can see them. Fix procedures so that men know where to stand and when to speak. If penalties are stern, at least let them be predictable. A panel of 10 is chosen to draft and to judge for a fixed term, while other offices step aside to give the task clear space. Men travel to cities across the sea to look at older boards and bring home what fits. The plan is simple in words and hard in life. Write a city so it can read itself. Even the wind through the square feels cleaner when news of the plan spreads. A trader whose thumb knows weights smiles at the thought of a posted line that will match his scales. A farmer who fears that a son could be held at a post for debt breathes easier when he imagines a limit written in public. A creditor who lends carefully does not mind rules that make his risk clear. The first step toward the boards is a kind of law already. It is the promise that rule will live in daylight. Night falls with a calm that belongs to towns that have chosen talk over blades. Still, there is worry. A new panel with unusual power could forget its place. People tired of arguments could accept too much silence. The city has learned much, but it has not learned everything. The next year will test whether a promise to write for all can survive the pride that writing itself can breed. The season opens with 10 men holding the task and the bench. They wear the signs of office and sit with rods before them. This is unusual, and the city tolerates it because the purpose is clear. They hear suits while they draft the lines that will become a common measure. The first boards rise. They hold rules for summons and the shape of a day in court. They speak to debts, property, and shared boundaries. They mark funeral limits and set the rights of a father in words that sound older than the walls. The boards stand in public where dust and light can find them. Boys are sent to learn passages by heart. Traders trace lines with a nail when disputes grow hot and cool them with the point of a letter. The sound of judgment changes. A magistrate no longer says a thing is so because he is who he is. He points to a sentence and reads. The parties listen, not to opinion, but to a rule that others heard yesterday and will hear tomorrow. Some penalties make modern ears flinch. A broken bone has a price. Theft at night may meet a blade. Paternal power bites hard in many matters. Yet even sharp lines feel kinder when they are straight and seen. Debt is the sore spot. Before the boards, harsh forms of pledge have tied men like posts tie rope. The boards do not empty the chest of penalties, but they do set weight and measure where there has been a fog. Terms for repayment, seizure, and relief become steps, not a shove. This is not mercy disguised as law. It is clarity that teaches mercy by showing cost in daylight. The first 10 have worked well. The city asks for 2 more boards to finish the task. A second panel takes seats. They add lines about marriage by capture, about the standing of classes, and about what is fit to build or to burn. They also begin to like the sound of their own power. Stories later will point at one man with a famous name and a dark look who takes what is not his to take. A father will be said to have chosen death for a daughter rather than see her made a toy of a judge. Whether the tale is exact, its lesson is not in doubt. Power without a counterweight bends sentence into wish. The people answer in the way this city has learned to answer best. They withdraw consent. Men leave the square, step to the edges, and make it clear that they will not walk under a rod held by a man who will not lay it down. The second 10 falter, then fall. Old offices return at once. Tribunes stand again to say no when pressed. The pair at the top takes their seats with the usual limits. The boards remain. Bad hands drop the chalk. Good lines stay. Walk to the boards with a friend. Read aloud together. One line says that if a man summons another, he shall appear, and if he cannot walk, a cart shall be provided. Another speaks to the depth of ditches that carry water between fields and the right to pass for necessary work. Another tells how a contract made in clear words must be kept as written. A set of rules limits wild grief at burials and the use of gold in tombs, because pride should not eat at the poor or the peace of a road. Procedure holds as much honor as penalty. The day for court must be posted. Witnesses must be called. The crowd begins to live by steps, not by shrugs. At home, families adjust to hearing rules in the air. A father whose hand has always been law learns to speak his will in the city's language. A wife who manages stores and servants learns which rights follow her daughter into a new house and which remain in the old. A freedman who saved bronze and bought his time back marks the line that says the act is good and must be respected. These adjustments are not loud. They are the feeling of a garment that fits better than the one before. Priests likewise adjust. Sacred time does not bow to statutes, yet the boards keep courts off days when vows are paid. And they write down what the elders always said about the marriage rite in a way that makes two houses sure they have acted well. A city where law and cult nod to each other is a city less likely to split itself in two. Foreigners listen with interest. Friends from Latin towns stand in the square and read the sentences like a new kind of bread. Delegates from farther places nod at lines that look like ones they learned at home and blink at others that are Roman to the core. A city that writes for itself teaches allies how to keep order without sending for help in every quarrel. Evening comes as men scratch lines from memory onto wax for sons to learn. Mothers set lamps near the boards so older eyes can see better. A small boy asks why a thief in darkness is judged more harshly than a thief by day. His grandfather answers that at night a man does not know whether he is defending grain or life. The boy nods and tastes the way rule and reason share a bed. What began as a defense against favor has become a pride that does not need a parade. The 12 tables, as people will call them, do not sing, they stand. That standing teaches more than 1,000 speeches. The city can now point to itself without pointing at a man. The board's words seep into craft. A stonemason measures a wall and leaves the neighbor a fair strip for maintenance, because a line on a tablet says that care for one's own must not blind a man to another's right to pass. A farmer who builds a trellis keeps it within his boundary, since a rule holds him to his own shade. A trader writes terms on a scrap before a sale, because a law says promise in words binds more strongly than nods in a crowd. Public life takes its cue. The right of appeal belongs to citizens in capital cause. Officers pause when a tribune raises a hand. A vote waits when the sky says wait. These are not annoyances. They are the habits that keep anger from wearing a city's face. In an emergency, a single command is named for a set span. He acts, reports, and resigns. A pride grows in watching that report read aloud and accepted in calm. The old lesson from the farmer who returned to his plow becomes a measure that scolds anyone tempted to linger. Debt comes around again, as it always will. A poor harvest and a levee season make a man late. The law allows firm steps that could end in chains. Voices on both sides ask the city to remember balance. A relief measure is passed that makes repayment real but not ruin. Public land is marked for small plots beyond the ridge, and veterans are first in line to take them. A creditor who sees his bronze return slowly rather than not at all finds reason to smile. A debtor who sees a path back to a field rather than a post finds reason to keep his head straight. That is how law earns love. Rights continue to steady the pulse. Sacred ladies keep the hearth of the city fed with clean fuel and steady hands. Priests read sky and entrails with the same patient care as a scribe reading a clause. Festivals still make rolls bend for a day, so pressure can bleed off before it breaks bones. The boards do not command these things. They sit beside them like an older brother, ready to point when talk gets hot. Military habits answer law with their own order. Units learn to change lines like a tide. Horn calls tell 1,000 men when to step. A soldier knows that his right to appeal in grave cause does not leave him on a field. He trusts the pair at the top to lead for a year and to lay the rods down at the end. He trusts a tribune to block a blow in an alley when heat and rank combine against one neck. Those trusts are the armor a city wears even when no metal shows. A small story near the boards says more than a list. A creditor and a farmer stand with faces tight. Each has brought a witness. A tribune arrives and asks for words, not shouts. The line on the board is read. It sets days, a rate, and a step for seizure only after those fail. It says a man may not be bound without open form. The creditor nods, not happy, not angry, only certain. The farmer nods, chastened and relieved. Both turn away with dignity. The crowd relaxes. That relief is the taste of justice when it is neither soft nor cruel. The second set of 10 still haunts the square as a warning. Mothers tell the tale of the judge who forgot he served. Fathers remind sons that clever speech is nothing without a clean hand on the rod. The city has kept the boards and discarded the men who tried to keep power without consent. That sorting is a skill as important as writing. It will matter in years when commanders with shining names stand on platforms and ask for trust larger than a year. Boys now chant verses of law instead of old war lines before sleep. Girls learn which clauses protect a dowry and how to keep a household within legal rights. Freedmen teach apprentices to point at a sentence when a customer asks for more than was agreed. Even thieves know the boards, since men who dance near lines must know where they lie. The 12 tables become the common speech of order. Stand at the edge of the forum as sunset warms the stone. The letters on the boards catch the red light and look almost soft. They are not soft. They are firm and fair. A city that began under kings has taught itself to be ruled by rules it can touch. The path from the palace door to the public tablet is not straight. It is steady. That steadiness is Rome's pride in these years before sea wars and grand names call for the world's ear. Here, in calm light, the law breathes with the people. The last crown leaves behind large projects and long shadows. On the Capitoline, the great temple to Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva nears its first dedication. Its porch is deep, its roof bright with clay figures that look out over roofs and lanes. Work began under Etruscan hands and Roman will. Terracotta beams are painted in colors that catch sun even on thin mornings. Below, the great drain keeps the forum dry when rain beats on the hills. These are the useful relics of a hard reign. Pride tried to own them. The city quietly reclaimed them. The fall of the king does not bring peace at once. North of the river, a powerful neighbor watches. Veii sits on a ridge and holds a rich country. To the east, hill towns test paths. A ruler from further north, Lars Porsena of Clusium, marches to restore a royal friend or to take a prize for himself. Tradition remembers a siege, a bridge, and a handful of figures made into lessons. A young officer, Horatius, stands with 2 others on wooden planks while axes bite at timbers behind them. When the span falls, he drops into the water and reaches the bank with armor heavy on his shoulders. Another youth, Mucius, tries to strike a blow in a crowded tent, fails, and lays his own right hand in a fire to show he can bear pain better than defeat. A maiden, Cloelia, swims a river with others and is praised by foe and friend for courage. Whether these stories hold each detail or not, their seed is true. A city learns to cloak fear in craft and to make loss serve memory. Porsena does not remain. Rome bargains, pays, and endures. Grain still grows in plots under the walls. Markets open under watchful eyes. A king's return becomes a tale told to frightened children who stay out late. In these years, a treaty is said to be made with a city across the sea that knows ships and trade as well as Rome knows roads and fields. Its terms speak of fair harbors and clear prices. Even if the parchment is younger than the words claim, the habit it records is old. Rome likes rules between strangers as much as at home. Near the forum, a dedication finally takes place. The great temple is opened with rites that tie the city's new order to vows made under the old. A magistrate's hand touches the gate and gives thanks for keeping a promise across a change in rule. That act says more than any curse on kings. Rome will complete what it begins, no matter who holds rods this year. Gods see steadiness. People learn it. Daily life leans into the new shape. Lictors still clear space, but their stride feels less like threat and more like order. The right to appeal in grave cause becomes a phrase boys can recite. A man who once weighed every word before a noble patron now speaks with a tribune in a lane when trouble rises suddenly. A creditor who keeps his ledgers neat appreciates a rule that protects him without asking him to play judge in the dark. The meaning of sacred rule shifts without breaking. A priestly king of rights replaces the royal name in ceremonies. The chief of the pontiffs keeps the calendar straight and judges whether a vow was rightly paid. Augurs look at the sky and birds with the same serious faces. The public flame kept by virgin hands still burns with clean fuel. In a house of aediles, records of markets and grain move from a pile to an ordered shelf. All this does not make a song. It makes the sound a city trusts at dawn. Neighbors watch. Some see a chance, some see a warning. The Latin towns across the plain come together and talk of equal shares in burdens and spoils. The Etruscan cities north of the river measure Rome's strength. Hill peoples come down for pasture and test fences. The city answers with treaties that bind and outposts that guard. It prefers a rope to a chain, but it can use iron when rope fails. The men who fought kings' battles now serve under pairs of officers who change each year. They learn to see the state as a tent that belongs to all, not as a garden behind one house. At day's end, the river Tiber slides under the first bridge done up again after war and watchfulness. Lamps prick the dark. A woman sets a cup in a doorway shrine and whispers for a son serving at a river ford. A mason cleans a chisel and looks at his hands, proud of a joint that will not weep in rain. The city's pride is not loud. It is a steady breath taken with the knowledge that pride alone broke a crown and that patience laid stones that still hold. Power learns new furniture. 2 curule chairs stand where one throne once stood. They are elegant and uncomfortable, on purpose. They remind a man that he sits for a spell and then rises. The lictor's bundles still tell a hard truth about discipline. Yet another truth now stands beside them, the right of a citizen to appeal in capital cases. A set of laws tied to the names Valerius and Horatius will later confirm that right after a harsh season under the Second Board of 10. For now, the principle is felt as much as written. Important acts must be seen, rules must be read, and a man threatened with the worst must have the city's voice between him and a rod. Some offices step forward. Quaestors mind money and grain, with ledgers that begin to look the same from year to year. A new pair of censors will soon number the people and judge who sits in the Senate. This office, born a little later in the 5th century before the Common Era, turns lists into mirrors. A man who hopes to count among elders must carry himself rightly in public and in private. The censor's mark can bruise honor more than a fine affects the purse. In the long run, that mark will steady many rooms. Priests weave between law and habit. The chief pontiff measures days and warns magistrates off certain mornings. The augurs note the curve of flight, the direction of a call, the quiet and the noise, and tell officers when consent can be asked. Fetial priests stand on borders with woolen bands and speak words that turn a quarrel into a lawful war, or that turn strangers into allies by a knot and a shared calf. Religion is not a decoration here. It is the set of limits that saves a city from tripping over its own feet. Assemblies gather in 2 shapes. One is military and civic at once, sorted by class into centuries. It votes on war and on the highest chairs. The other grows from tribes of land and street. It can pass measures that touch daily bread, market rules, and the safety of ordinary folk. Tribunes speak here. Their persons are guarded by a vow that makes the crowd itself a shield. They raise a hand, and a judgment pauses. They step to a doorway, and a man who thought himself alone breathes again. This is the soil from which the 12 tables have just sprung. Their boards stand where all can see. They do more than settle cases. They teach form. A case must be called properly. Witnesses must come when summoned. A day set for court must be honored. A dowry returned when a marriage ends without fault must be counted with care. A father's right is strong, a boundary stone is sacred. A thief by night is different from a thief by day. These lines do not erase pain. They prevent surprises. In a city that has known a king who was surprised at will, that prevention feels like mercy. Strain has not vanished. Intermarriage between patricians and plebeians remains a live question. Custom says no in high houses. Young faces on both sides look at one another in markets and at festivals and wonder what a no is really worth. A few years from now, a law tied to the name Canuleus will open that door. For the moment, tension adds a pinch to many households and a point to many speeches. War remains a teacher. Calls to muster still move along roads. Lines still form on fields. Allies answer or explain. The form of command holds. Two men with equal power, each able to halt the other if judgment runs hot. In emergencies, a single name rises for a fixed span and then falls. That rise and fall are now customs as dear to Romans as any feast. They speak in simple acts the city's new truth. Power is alone. On an afternoon thick with dust from carts, a tribune stops at a stall where a debtor and creditor quarrel. He does not thunder. He asks for the board to be read. He names the day by which payment must be tried again, and the limit beyond which hands shall not be laid without further form. The men nod. The crowd, which had begun to lean in, leans back and returns to olives and cloth. That small easing is the breath a republic lives on. Hunger and service combine into a single protest. Men who owe seed and muscle to their fields have spent seasons under arms and returned to find weeds and wary creditors. Bronze weighs more in winter when threshing fails. Lines at stalls whisper resentment. The city tries to patch problem after problem and then sees it must treat the wound, not the blood. The plebeians decide to stand apart as one body. They do not riot. They walk, out through a gate, onto higher ground. They camp. The ridge where they gather looks back at the city's walls. Fires burn evenly. Voices are low. There is no looting. There is resolve. The elders inside the walls know that the heart has stepped out of the chest. Without these men there is no levy, no harvest, no work to lay stone or to dig drains. Messengers go out with open hands. Talks begin under oaks. A parable is told by an elder named Menenius. He speaks of limbs that refused to feed a belly they thought idle. Soon the limbs lost strength because the belly's quiet work had fed them all along. The tale calms some tempers without flattering them. The deeper answer is structural. The city creates an office for the plebs, tribunes with the power to say no to harm and aediles to mind records and markets. The persons of these tribunes are made sacred by a vow. To strike them is to be cursed by the people and the gods at once. A cord is tied between the hill and the forum that will not cut easily. The new officers prove their use in small scenes. In a lane near the cattle market, a man is dragged toward a post for a debt he disputes. A tribune steps in front and places a hand on the rope. He says a single word, "Stop." The creditor, who has always kept his books neat and his conduct within form, steps back and calls for a day before an assembly. The knot loosens. A scribe makes a record. Men who had paused to watch resume their tasks. A city discovers that protection done calmly can make life lighter for all, even for those who think they do not need it. The secession, as later ages will call it, ends not with a surrender, but with a treaty inside the walls. The plebs return with honor. Their officers sit on benches that look toward the boards and toward the market alike. The lesson is not lost on anyone. When the part of the body that bleeds and sweats withdraws, the rest chills at once. A republic must keep that part warm. Festivals return with better faces. The winter rite where bands run and tap women with thongs is now laughed at with more trust, because the women know the men took a stand that was not against them. The day when roles turn over releases pressure that might have burst elsewhere. The feast where grain and salt share a broad taste of a city that can be generous to itself. The sacred flame is kept as steady as ever. The little shrine in a kitchen corner receives its fruit and grain. The bridge's old piles are inspected and mended with hemp and prayers. None of this changes because a crowd once slept outside the walls. The gods are patient with forms when forms protect the weak. Priests nod to tribunes. Tribunes nod to priests. A city that sees these nods often learns to imitate them in other rooms. Over months and years, the plebeians' officers gain more than defense. They call people to vote in their tribes. They pass measures that bind their own order, and with time and struggle, bind all. That road will be long. For now, the right to say no and to be heard without fear is the treasure. Men go back to fields and to levy with shoulders higher than before. The city, which has gained a second spine, stands straighter too. The first agreement after the walkout is inward. The next is outward. A treaty with Latin neighbors, remembered under the name of Cassius, draws a line of common interest. Towns that once counted spoils and grudges by themselves now reckon shares together and meet under a single sky to swear not to harm each other's fields. When a raid comes from a ridge or a strong city to the north stirs trouble, the League gathers, counts by tribes and centuries, and moves with fewer arguments about who stands where. This peace among cousins does not erase rivalry, it makes it useful. Games are held where young men race and throw. Old men compare crops and remember years when vines outpaced grain. Priests swap signs and agree on dates. Roads between towns grow less wild. A path beaten by carts has a crown in the middle, so rain moves to each side. A ford is marked by stones with iron rings. A small post with a number cut into it tells a traveler how far he is from either square. Markets find their rhythm. An 8-day cycle brings country folk into town on the same day each turn. The nundine become a drum that sets feet moving and keeps granaries honest. A man who brings beans knows when he will likely sell. A woman who needs salt knows when to meet him. Bronze still moves by weight, but more pieces now carry marks that everyone trusts. A scale in the open, with weights that match a stick fixed to a public wall, keeps temptation small. Colonies appear where lines are thin. A grid of streets sits on a gentle knoll. Plots radiate out like rays, measured by cords and by a man's breath. Settlers take oaths to keep watch and to carry messages fast. Local gods receive a respectful nod. A little forum with a well and a small temple grows. The mother city adds a bead to a necklace that crosses rough ground without snapping. War does not vanish. Etruscan cities, Latin rivals, and hill peoples move like weather systems. A Roman column meets a mixed line on a plain near a wood. The fight is hard. Men carry home wounds and wealth in equal measure. The city counts both and pays rights for the fallen. Inside the walls, a senator predicts trouble with one neighbor because a canal has changed a river's course and made a meadow worth fighting over. A tribune proposes a rule about common pasture outside one gate to quiet quarrels at home, so hands are free for spears abroad. The proposals pass where they should. A small law about sheep and grass helps keep a large peace about shields and ground. At home, the older bar on intermarriage between patricians and plebeians still pinches. Lovers exchange glances and sighs. Fathers take deep breaths and sip wine before answering questions they cannot yet say yes to. The pressure rises quietly, like water behind a weir. A few years on, a law will open the gate and a parade of wreaths will follow. For now, the city learns to carry hope without letting it spill into harm. Stand by the river mouth on a clear morning. Small craft ride the tide. Nets hang to dry. A man from a coastal town brings shells and news. A woman from inland sells honey cakes that grit a little between the teeth from clean ash. They exchange a smile and a price. The treaty holds. The market day steadies steps. The boards in the forum wait for the next case. The temple above still glints. In this weave of law, league, and ordinary work, Rome finds the balance that will let it face larger storms. Pressure at home finds release in a change that makes many households smile. A law carried by a tribune named Canuleius opens marriage between patricians and plebeians. The old bar had turned affection into irritation and alliance into suspicion. With the door unlocked, families draw up contracts that carry dowries and honor across lines once painted too boldly. Young faces look less anxious at festivals. Old faces find new ways to make kin. On the same wind blows talk about the very top seats. The pair of consuls still stands for the year's highest charge, but quarrels about who may sit there and whether the city is best served by two of one order or by another arrangement test habit. For several terms across coming years, the city chooses to let more than 2 men hold consular power without the title, a flexible bench of military tribunes with consular authority. In some years they are many, in others few, and for a long time they come only from older houses. The shape is a compromise. It lets more shoulders carry the beam while the argument about who may stand beneath it continues without breaking the lintel. Another office born in these decades proves lasting and deep. The censors, 2 at a time and serving for a span long enough to read a generation, count citizens, assign classes, let contracts for roads and public works, and judge conduct where law leaves gaps. Their note on a name can remove a man from the Senate or from a horseman's ranks for reasons that a code cannot phrase but a city understands: fraud, cruelty, shameless display. At the same time, they can praise a community by building something everyone uses: a road that runs straight over soft ground, a water line that stays clean in July. One day, a censor named Appius will link Far Springs to town. For now, his type is forming, a caretaker with imagination. The 12 tables continue to shape voices and hands. Boys in plain tunics chant the clauses about summons, debts, boundaries, funerals, and family power. Girls learn which words seal a contract and which make a marriage sound in the ear of the law. Merchants mark Nundine cycles on door lintels with charcoal so assistants do not forget stock days. Farmers know the permitted depth of a shared ditch and the penalty for stopping a neighbor's flow in dry months. A city that can recite its rules is less quick to rage. The right of appeal grows ribs. What began as a tone becomes a line written again after the fall of the second board. A citizen in danger before the rods may cry to the people, and the people's hearing cannot be skipped by any clever officer. Tribunes are confirmed in their safety, and their acts gain firmer ground. Those who tried to silence them under the second board are named in stories as warnings against men who love their own words too much. A small case shows the climate. A marriage of mixed order is challenged by a sour cousin who pretends to protect purity. He cites old customs. The pair cites the new law with a verse learned by heart. The magistrate nods at the law, nods at the couple, and nods at the cousin toward the door. The crowd breathes out. The cousin leaves with enough face to dine in public, but not enough to try that trick again. The city's grin is thin and satisfied. Foreigners still test fences. An Etruscan ridge grows noisy. A Latin town complains that a Roman contract undercut its own. Tribunes and elders pull in different directions and then meet under a roof where cooler air sits. A levy is called without drama. A treaty is adjusted with clear sums. The roads carry men and then bring them home. The boards do not march, but they keep marching from becoming a habit without reason. Evening light touches letters on the tables. The law about simple funerals pleases everyone who has stood too long under a hot sun while the rich make grief a show. The law about debt stings and soothes in turn. The law about intermarriage is read like a love poem by some and like a cautious concession by others. Together they make a chord. It is not loud. It is steady and in tune. The young republic hardens its frame. The practice of naming several military tribunes with consular authority gives the city room to maneuver when rivalries over the consulship run hot. Not every year uses the option. When it does, the bench gains hands without lengthening any one arm beyond the rules. On a few mornings, 6 chairs stand where 2 once stood, and the sight teaches that Rome can change the furniture without changing the room. Creation of the censor's office deepens the habit of taking stock. Every few years, citizens file by tribes and give names, ages, property, and sons. Lists lengthen, then are cleaned. Classes are adjusted with care. Horses are assigned to those who can keep them. Contracts for road repair, bridge upkeep, and sewer arches are bid out from a platform, with the winners' names carved where travelers can see them and judge in winter whether the work was sound. A man can buy praise cheaply by doing such work well. He can buy shame dearly by letting a stone shift before its time. The fetial priesthood shapes foreign acts with the same love of form. At borders, the pater patratus wraps a wool band around his hand, recites the wrong to the heir and to the enemy, and throws a spear into ground chosen by rule to mark the start of lawful war when remedy is refused. When peace is made, lambs are slain with shared vows, and tablets witness the pact words. This care seems slow to some and precious to others. It keeps enemies from thinking Romans are raiders. It keeps Romans from becoming what the rules fear. At home, the calendar guides both court and camp. Days are marked fair or closed. A month can be eased forward by intercalation when fields and moons drift apart. The man who holds that power answers to priests and to common sense, since restless people will not endure tricks long. Markets keep to their 8-day beat. Feast days lower voices and make room for laughter and for charity. A city that knows what day it is can make a plan longer than a week. Law keeps finding corners. A rule appears about roofs and eaves, so rain from one house does not rot a neighbor's wall. Another sets the limits of mourning, so grief does not become a contest. Another keeps hired hands from being held beyond the hour when pay stops. None of these rules makes a statue. They make beds easier to sleep in. The two orders continue their long argument without breaking the table. Older names resist a mixed pair at the top seat. Younger men push. Tribunes use silence and interruption when speeches gallop. Elders use memory and caution when boys run. This tug lasts years. It makes enemies and also teaches many to listen. When a mixed year finally comes, the city notes it with less drama than speeches predicted. The sun rises. Bread is baked. A plebeian on a curule chair looks like any man who wakes early. A traveler from a Greek city up the coast stops in the forum and reads the tables. He smiles at some lines and frowns at others. He tells a friend later that the Romans write like farmers, with straight furrows, few flowers, and good drainage. The friend asks whether that is a compliment. The traveler shrugs. He bought a fair measure of oil at a good price and left with all his fingers. He would call it praise. War remains an errand boy for change. In these middle decades of the 5th century before the Common Era, Rome fights skirmishes, fields levies, builds camps, and returns to lay stones. It is not the season of great conquests yet. It is the season of getting used to being many without being formless. The army's line breathes. Light troops learn to run and throw, then melt back. Heavy ranks learn to push and to yield by signal. Camp goes up each night in a pattern that feels like home. Ditch, rampart, 4 gates, straight streets, commander's tent at the heart. Men sleep under the same stars in a grid they could draw with a stick in dust. Allies move with Rome on agreed terms. Latin towns send men by treaty. Their units keep their own standards and officers, but they stand where the plan sets them. Spoils are counted and shared by rule. A dispute about a captured wagon is settled by lot and by a gesture from a censor who reminds both sides that a road he let last year serves them both. The habit of tying friends by clear lines grows stronger than the memory of who insulted whom at a festival 3 summers ago. The economy follows the roads. Bronze by weight still carries most exchange. Flat pieces stamped with animals move faster than lumps. A set of official weights hangs near the speaking place. A boy checks his master's measure against them when the crowd thinks, proud to be trusted. The 8-day market cycle keeps supply and talk in balance. A farmer learns to bring cheese on the 4th and the 12th day of the month because city folk now expect it. A weaver learns that a tribune's day tends to lift demand for cloth because officers call meetings and men dress with care. Houses adjust to new marriages between ranks. Dowries flow with more freedom, and kinship charts grow more tangled. Grandmothers smile at babies with blended names. Old men tell themselves they always expected this. A few hold their noses and discover they can still breathe. The law, by setting the rule beneath the feeling, keeps the peace by making the feeling respectable. A small lawsuit runs its course. A man of moderate means claims his wall has been harmed by his neighbor's roof water. The neighbor says the eaves have always hung that way. A magistrate measures and quotes a line that now lives in many mouths. He orders a small change and a small payment. Neither party is ruined. Both feel seen. That sense that a rule fits the size of the hurt is worth more to a city than any single triumph. Priests oversee a reconciliation between a right and a rule. A line about funerals meets a family's wish to honor a matron whose quiet generosity has fed half a lane. The law limits display. The priest suggests acts that please the dead and ease the living without fireworks. Bread to neighbors, oil for the baths, a small tablet at the temple door. The family obeys and finds that their grief feels lighter when it is shared in simple things. At sunset, letters on the tables look like shallow cuts filled with wine. Boys recite them in sing-song voices. Men trace them with a finger and remember a case they won or lost without rancor because the board had stood between tempers. Women count jars and mark nundinae with a bit of chalk near the hearth. The city's learning is not clever, it is durable. The first generation born after kings comes of age. Their fathers remember a crown. They remember a vow shouted in anger and a walk to a ridge with grim faces. The sons remember 2 chairs, boards in the sun, and a tribune who once stopped a blow in a lane. Their confidence feels different. They expect form. They expect a voice. They expect the city to save them from both chaos and whim. In that spirit, more adjustments come. The mixed year at the top seat finally arrives and then begins to recur. Plebeians sit beside patricians and learn that authority tastes the same to those who carry it well, no matter whose ancestors ate with whom. The office of praetor, the judge who minds civil law, will soon take shape so the consuls can focus on soldiers and on the state's larger bones. That change belongs near the end of the century. You can hear it in the air already when weary magistrates spend long mornings on cases while messengers wait with letters from a frontier. Censors finish a lustrum and lead a rite that cleanses the people after counting. The lists are tied with cord and wax. Men have moved between classes. Some have risen by thrift and by marrying well. Some have fallen by loss or by a censor's frown at conduct. Roads under contract show good stone in some stretches and poor in others. Names of contractors beside the bad stretches are read aloud. A man who knows shame fixes his work faster than a man who only fears a fine. The 12 tables, worn by fingers and by weather, receive repairs. Copies hang where boys learn letters. A line about a thief by night still pricks ears. A line about debt still raises careful brows. A line about intermarriage now sounds ordinary. That change in sound is the point. Law soaks into life and becomes manners. When that happens, a city grows a skin that keeps out infection without thinking about it. Neighbors sense the new steadiness. A raid is less tempting when roads promise a quick reply. A treaty is more attractive when oaths are kept not by one man's honor but by a people's habit. Rome is still one town among many. It is not poor, not rich, not yet feared across seas. It is stubborn. It has learned to bind itself and to use those bindings as muscles rather than restraints. Stand at the edge of the forum as dusk gathers. The great temple on the hill holds its color. The drain below your feet pulls a thin stream toward the river. A tribune passes with no escort and no fear. A censor's clerk carries a tablet larger than his arm. A child stops at the tables and runs a finger under a line without reading yet, just to feel the cut. This is the world the last kings accidentally prepared, and the first laws quietly built. The sea lies ahead. For now, the city sleeps under rules it chose, and wakes to keep choosing them again. After the fall of the second board of 10, the city fixes 3 nails into its doorframe so the house stands straight. First, the right of appeal in capital matters is spoken again with greater force. A citizen who hears a death sentence may call to the people, and officers must make room for that voice. Second, the persons of tribunes and their aides are guarded by sacred vow beyond any clever twist. Third, decrees of the Senate are to be kept and published with regular care, so counsel does not hide in shadow. People later attach the names Valerius and Horatius to these repairs. Whether every letter bears those names at birth, the shape is true. A republic watches its own hands. Life turns on these hinges in quiet scenes. A judge pauses when a tribune lifts palm and says a single word. A clerk walks a copy of a senatorial opinion to a chest and seals it with wax so a future quarrel cannot claim the past said nothing. A condemned man asks for the people, and the people listen long enough to be sure the form was kept and the harm proved. Sometimes they confirm the judgment. Sometimes they calm a heat that ran too fast. Either way, the city breathes more evenly for the pause. The story of the Second Secession leaves marks on streets. Men remember gathering first on the Aventine and then moving to the Sacred Mount, where still air and scrub trees make speech carry. Mothers bring bread and cheese to the camp and look into faces that are angry without being wild. When the men return, the lanes seem tighter with gratitude. Shops give small favors for a week. A mason refuses coins for an extra line of dressing on a stone that faces a widow's eye each morning. None of this goes into law. All of it cements it. Priests keep their own balance with care. The rex for rights, separated from command, leads old ceremonies without touching the office. The chief pontiff notes that certain days remain closed to lawsuits, and that no officer, however eager, may twist the calendar to gain advantage too often without angering both heaven and neighbor. Augurs stand with long staff and watch the arc of birds before assemblies vote. Men who mock the sky in private, still respected in public. That shared theater of limit stops arguments from catching fire. In the forum, the 12 tables stand like a row of teeth that bite only when needed. Boys chant lines about summons and bonds until they taste the rhythm in their sleep. Traders scratch clauses on wax, so apprentices learn which words count and which are only stall patterns. Women who manage stores read the rule about dowry and plan for daughters with a calm that had been missing. A freedman explains to his son how a purchase by the formal touch and weight of bronze makes ownership secure in any crowd. These acts knit the boards into bone. A winter evening shows the new tone. News comes that a band from a ridge has cut vines and driven off goats. The Senate meets under smoky lamps. Elders speak. A messenger waits, shifting weight from foot to foot. A tribune listens and then says the plan may pass, provided no levy tears men from fields 2 days before a posted market that will set winter prices for oil and grain. The officers agree. The messenger runs. The plan works. The city learns again that limits and speed can live together. At the river, water moves slowly and surely. A boy tests a knotted rope along the wharf and counts softly. Across town, a scribe copies a clause about the depth of shared ditches. On the hill, the great temple keeps watch with bright clay gods that look as if they could step down. A century after a crown learned it was only a hat, the republic wears its rules like a fitted cloak. Courts change most in the mouth. Before the boards, much depended on who could speak longest and whose memory carried the weight of a clan. After the boards, form rules. A plaintiff calls a defendant by set words at a set place. If the man cannot walk, a cart is provided. If he will not come, a witness is fetched and a hand laid in public sight. When both stand before the bench, the steps unfold. The judge says the lines he must, the parties say the lines they must, and the day moves according to rhythms that even children begin to hum. These fixed speeches, the old actions of the law, are not poetry. They are fences. Step over one and the case fails, not because the complaint was empty, but because the city prefers loss by mistake to loss by whim. Men learn to hire guides for the fences. Notaries run small shops near the forum. A few bright youths hang lamps in back rooms and study forms by firelight until the clauses sit on their tongues. The first generation of legal minds begins not with books, but with ears and exact lines. Procedure sits at the heart. Days for suits are marked on boards. A man who drags a neighbor to court on a closed day earns not only scorn, but a formal rebuke. Witnesses swear in public before speaking and cannot become invisible after. The penalty for lying under oath is not a lightning strike, though men invoke it. It is the slow pain of a mark on honor that follows a name into the market and marriage. The boards reach into family and property with the same hard gentleness. A father's power is strong. He can bind sons in contracts and choose their matches. Yet even here, forms and limits live. Thrice selling a son cuts the tie. A daughter's dowry carries with her, and should be returned if marriage ends without her fault. A ward's goods are not a jar to dip a hand into. A guardian owes an account. The city prefers old authority, but it will not let it rot into theft. Household transactions have their theater. The formal sale with bronze and scales turns a slave, a field, or a beast into a thing held in law as firmly as in a hand. It seems quaint to those who love speed. It saves neighbors time in the end. A gift made before witnesses with a touch of copper avoids long quarrels when winter makes tempers short. Funeral rules tame pride. No cheeks cut, no battles of display among the living over the dead. No burial within the sacred line. Gold stays off the pyre, save what mends a tooth. Wailing has limits as time has limits. Ashes go to jars and jars to roadsides where names can be read by travelers who might otherwise forget how brief a life is. The city keeps grief from becoming a new tax on the poor. A morning trial shows how much calmer the square has grown. Two farmers speak about a boundary and a hedge. One says storms pushed the line. The other says hands did. The judge hears the set words, walks the distance, measures with a cord that bears a public knot, and finds for the man whose stones still show lichen older than any storm this year. A small fine flows. A larger quarrel ebbs. The crowd disperses with a sense of having lived through a lesson, not a performance. These forms do not make Rome gentle. They make her predictable. A neighbor may still be harsh. A creditor may still press, but he must press in light, and the light teaches him to keep his balance. Beneath the public square lies the house, and beneath the house lies the family. The boards speak here too. 3 marriage paths live in memory and habit. One is ancient and solemn, with a shared cake of grain before a flame, priestly hands on heads, and words that sound as old as the hills. Another is a purchase in form, a woman passing under her husband's hand with a token weight of bronze and a circle of approved witnesses. A third grows by time, when living together under one roof for a year without 3 nights away turns affection into a bond the law will recognize. These forms suit different pockets and different clans. They all bind if done in light. A wife steers a house by right as well as by custom. The dowry she brings is not a gift to be lost in the husband's chest. It funds the joint work and returns in part when the work ends without her fault. Her guardianship, if she lives under it, is less a leash than a lockbox key others must hold and use for her protection. Over time, habits soften the sharper edges. A capable woman manages fields, shops, and servants because the work needs doing. Law follows practice like a second shadow. Children move under strong hands that do not always shake kindly. A father's power reaches far into contracts and punishments. Yet the city marks limits. Thrice sale breaks the old hold. A son who serves well and marries with consent may expect patience more than rule. Adoption is a bridge over gaps in lineage, and it bears the full weight of love when stepped upon. A child moves to a new house with a name and a share, and learns to bless 2 hearths. Property lives by clear acts. A man who holds a thing openly as his for a long span without challenge gains a kind of right that courts recognize. A buyer who takes a field by the bronze and scales act stands stronger than one who paid in whispers. Servitudes, the small rights over another's ground, let water flow and feet pass where they must, provided boundaries are honored. A city that sets such threads saves axes and tempers. Slaves stand inside this order as both tools and persons under watch. The law calls them property. Ritual and custom admit they breathe, suffer, and can be freed. Manumission appears at market posts with light rods and certain words. A freedman takes the name of a former master and a place in the tribes. He owes duty to the house that lifted him and owes his own children fierce love because he remembers hunger from the inside. At dusk, a woman ties a key to her belt and counts oil jars. A boy recites a line about guardianship and stumbles on a hard word his sister corrects. A father returns from court quieter than when he left because a neighbor spoke true and he was forced to nod. The hearth gods watch from their shelf with smoke-dark faces. Family life already had rules. The 12 tables gave the rules a voice the city can hold. Land makes neighbors and neighbors make quarrels. The boards speak most sensibly where feet meet soil. A boundary stone is more than rock. To shift one is to wound a pact with the living and the dead. A road across private fields for the sake of access keeps a width the cart can use and a rider can judge with one glance. A water channel must be kept open to a depth the rule says, and the rule is not a rumor but a line a boy can point at. Damage has a measured answer. If a limb is broken without just cause, there is a price. If a man harms another by chance, he answers with coin and apology rather than blood. If a thief comes by night, a householder may meet him with steel. If the theft is by day, a shout must come first so a crowd can witness the balance. Fire that leaps from a brush pile to a neighbor's roof brings penalty fit to carelessness rather than the lash of intent. These gradations taste like common sense because they were drawn from it, then fixed so memory cannot make them softer for friends and harder for foes. Contracts grow more legible. A bargain spoken in clear words and witnessed binds like rope. A bargain muttered and shrugged at a stall can be denied by either man when a price turns sour. Men learn to write more often, or to hire hands that can. Notaries who once scraped by on copying now find steady work drawing neat lines between promise and hope. Inheritance receives lines that balance clan and care. If a man dies without a stated will, his own pass first, then brothers, then wider kin as far as a scribe can count. If a will speaks, the city listens, provided forms were kept and witnesses named. Guardians for minors step in with duties stricter than any casual uncle would like. The law does not let a dead man's labor be cut to ribbons by living hands. One afternoon, a small procession moves beyond the sacred line. Ashes in a jar, a simple song, neighbors holding lamps even in daylight. The tomb sits by a road with a name carved plain. A child runs her finger in the cut letters and asks how long the stone lasts. Her mother says longer than anger if we let it. The rule that keeps graves outside the living space teaches both cleanliness and perspective. At market, a seller of jars points at a posted measure and invites a buyer to check his claim. The buyer does, laughs, and pays without complaint. The small dance between trust and proof becomes a habit of peace. These are not grand things. Grand things rest on them as roofs rest on beams. Debt is a dark thread in a bright cloth. The law measures it so it does not strangle, yet even measured it bites. In lean years, men pledge labor and bodies under forms that keep the peace at the cost of dignity. The word for that old knot sits heavy in my mouth. Tribunes visit posts and untie ropes when creditors forget that form is not licensed to humiliate. Elders propose relief when too many fields go to seed because too many hands are bound in courts. A morning in the forum shows the dance. A creditor presents tablets, neat and sealed. A farmer stands with dirt still in the lines of his fingers. The tablets speak for the coin. The farmer speaks of a levee season and a storm that took seed. The board holds days and rates. It says what may be taken and when. A tribune proposes a schedule that saves both men. The crowd approves in that low sound that marks fairness. The creditor gets his bronze across time, which is better than none. The farmer keeps a roof. The city keeps two citizens who can meet eyes. Over years, these scenes move attitudes. A stern man who once thought pity a weakness realizes that mercy with rule feeds both parties. A bitter man who once feared all credit learns that a fair schedule can teach thrift instead of despair. A city that has seen itself burned by foreign hands after a bad day will one day remember that it chose not to burn itself from the inside during a bad harvest. Such memory keeps future storms from tearing roofs off. Not all creditors are wolves. Many are neighbors with tools and seed to lend. They learn to write better terms and to accept security that is less cruel than a body at a post. They learn to value a reputation for fairness. A man with that name gets first chance at a contract for paving a lane or at a shipment of timber from the hills. Honor becomes collateral of a kind. It pays. In houses, women hide small coins and small hope in jars. They count nundine cycles and catch bargains when stalls thin at dusk. They send boys with baskets to collect ash from the baths for soapweed, and they save oil by trimming wicks carefully. Debt is not fought only in courts. It is fought in kitchens by habits that take the weight off a scale 1 grain at a time. Priests have little to say here beyond the old warnings against fraud and the old praise for vows paid. Yet festivals where bread is shared and fire is made common remind rich and poor that both eat, both fear winter, and both age. Rights cannot cancel tablets. They can freshen patience, which is half of justice. Assemblies carry much on their backs. The one named for centuries, men sorted by means, votes on war and on the top chairs. The order of calling classes often lets the wealthy decide if the poor agree. Yet the poor still matter, because numbers and time still matter. The assembly by tribes, men sorted by neighborhoods and lands, grows in strength for passing rules that touch markets and safety. Tribunes stand there. Their rules cannot push them from that ground. These two fields, different in tilt, balance each other more than they bite. Census days teach men who they are. A clerk sits with a list. A citizen steps forward and states age, clan, wife, sons, lands, debts. He does not confess. He declares. The censors mark and move him. Pride swells when a mark rises. Embarrassment warms the neck when it falls. The abstraction of Rome becomes a table with many names and a number beside each. A city that counts itself learns what it can lift. Militia drill trains the line to breathe. The first rank, young and quick, steps up with heavy shafts that bend and bite, then falls back by file when the horn speaks. The second rank, older, sets broader shields and waits to receive weight. The third holds like a wall and knows it will be called when others have given. This pattern suits rough fields. It also suits a mind that prefers resilience to brilliance. When men vote, they carry that same rhythm in their chests. Give, hold, hinge. It becomes the music of law as much as war. A story travels of a farmer called from a furrow to take brief command in fear, then stepping down without shame when the fear passes. Children hear the name and learn the point without needing dates. Emergency is a bridge, not a road. The office that crosses it dissolves like frost in the sun. The plow waits. Fields do not flatter. Roads begin to show the future. A surveyor places posts and strings over low ground. A ditch is dug, stones laid, gravel tamped, a crown shaped so rain runs off. A milestone is planted so even a man who cannot read can count his way home by fingers on carved numbers. The young learn that straight does not mean hard when you are cold and the ground is firm. Water follows. A covered line hums softly as it feeds quarters where wells once failed in late summer. A woman fills a jar from a public spout and blesses the list of names chiseled on the stone that hides the pipe. She does not care who had the idea. She cares that her child sleeps without coughing. She tells a neighbor. That story moves faster than any speech. Foreigners learn to read Rome's face. An Etruscan town on a ridge tests a border and finds that a treaty is a door that opens and closes on known hinges, rather than a curtain to push through. A Latin cousin objects to a contract that undercut his price and finds a board of men ready to hear a sum, not a groan. A Greek trader from a city that praises cleverness watches a tribune stop a judgment with a raised hand and feels something like respect. The Romans are not witty. They are solid. A official priest stands at a boundary, wool band on arm, speaking wrongs in an old cadence that makes the hair on necks lift. He throws a spear into a patch of ground that law calls enemy, even when peace holds. The gesture feels theatrical to some. It teaches everyone present that war comes only after words. When peace is made, the same men slaughter a clean animal and swear. A treaty tastes like iron and blood as well as like ink. Colonies keep watch on lines where pasture meets crop. Streets cross at right angles on a knoll that takes wind. A well sits near a small square. A modest temple places a porch where the sun sits kindly. Plots around the town are measured with cords and given to men who build, sow, and send word if riders pass at night. The mother city gains eyes and hands rather than ulcers. Those who live in the new place gain a forum to stand in and a fence tall enough to make sleep easier. Markets knit neighbors tighter than fear tears them. An 8-day rhythm brings the same faces together on the same stones. Women compare fruit and news. Men argue weights and rules. Children learn the smell of oil. Bronze stamped with marks passes faster than lumps weighed. A boy hands his mother change and smiles because he guessed the sum correctly before the seller said it. The 12 tables travel by memory more than by scraped copies. A visiting elder recites a clause about boundaries from heart and is corrected on a syllable by a Roman boy proud of his teacher. Both laugh. The rule, living in two mouths, becomes a path both towns can walk without tripping. At dusk, boats knock softly at moorings. Far above, letters on the hilltop temple's pediment still hold color. Between the river and ridge, the city moves in small circles that strengthen arms and calm minds. The monarchy has become a story. The law has become a habit. Both feed supper. We come to the end of this first age of rules. A crown fell because it forgot that a city is not a household to be managed by one will. An oath rose that swore against crowns by any name. 2 chairs replaced one, short seasons replaced lifetimes, and the rods that once frightened now reassure because they walk under vows that any citizen can speak against in full light. Tribunes found a word that stops harm until many ears can hear. Elders learned to advise without ruling. Priests kept days steady so the calendar did not become another club. Most of all, words cut in wood and bronze taught the city to recognize itself. The 12 tables are not a high song. They are a steady drum. Summons, witnesses, debts with steps, fathers with duties as well as rights, graves with limits, boundaries with sanctity, contracts with form, neighbors with obligations, thieves with differences between night and day. Each line is small. Together they build a place where anger seldom needs to shout. We have not strayed into the next few hills. Those belong to the long contest between orders and the measured opening of the highest seats, to relief from old bonds, to fresh burdens that growth brings, and to roads that bind the whole peninsula. For now, stand in the forum in the evening. Lamps blink on. The river Tiber moves slowly beyond the market's edge. A boy touches letters with a fingertip dark with dust. A woman checks a dowry chest and smiles at the feel of a sound lock. A tribune walks without escort and without fear. A censor's man posts a list that will make a contractor work straighter tomorrow. The city is not yet great. It is ready. When you wake, we will take up the next thread. Plebs and patricians, tribunes, secessions, and a city's balance. How the tug that began here ripens into reforms that give the Republic its long stride. If you'd like more calm history when you wake or as you drift, follow the full series playlist and subscribe so the next episode is waiting for you.